want to just welcome everyone for joining us today as we roll out the second of our COVID conversations. So the beautiful part about webinars is you can literally be joining us from anywhere. And we have some added communication options that we may not have been able to use had we been sitting in a large room. One that I encourage you all to use is the chat box. And just to get us started, I'm going to throw out a little welcome as well as a random did you know fact. We do have quite a few participants in and maybe a few more to go. But for now, what we're going to do is just go ahead and get it started with or without them. And hopefully they just keep piling in. So again, welcome to the second of our 3 COVID conversation series. We hope that you can lunch and learn along with us as we explore over the 3 sector-specific discussions. Remember to use that chat box. Don't forget to ask questions. Today, we're going to feature meat birds and specifically our broilers. Before we get too much further, I'm going to just do a quick reminder of how to get the most out of this webinar for yourselves. So you can chat with other participants or panelists. You can raise your hand if you're having any problems to get the attention of our moderators, and we will do our best to help you out. If you have a question, feel free to go ahead and pop it in the question box. I will take this moment to remind you that your questions can either be sent with the username that you've logged in or anonymously. If you send them anonymously, of course, we can't follow up if we have missed you during the event. We do aim to answer all the questions from our panelists, and either it'll be done today or in future communications, so keep your eyes peeled. Our panelists are going to try to support our team by answering your questions in the chat box. So again, if you're not using it yet, pop it open in the bottom of your taskbar and keep it going. We're going to launch a very quick poll just to see who we've got signed in with us and where we're sitting. While you're polling, I'm going to take this moment to just remind you the purpose of our discussion forums. We're here to share insights about how the supply chain has been affected. Many businesses have found new safety procedures that have led to new practices. Some are worth keeping, but which ones? These forums will share stories from a variety of businesses that have made effective changes that we can all learn from. So give you one last second to go ahead and cast those votes before we move on to talking about our panelists who have been gracious enough to join us. So although not everyone got a chance to vote, we'll go ahead and share those very brief results just to get an idea of who we've got on the line with us. Now that we've got all of that shared out, we're going to go ahead and move on to the panelists that you can see as long as you're hitting that gallery view joining me today. We have Becky Timmons, Altec's Chief Product Officer, Sarah Shepard from MoveFleet. We've got Chantal LeBlanc, Senior Animal Welfare Specialist from Maple Leaf. And we also welcome Denis Carrier from Merck, who is going to be beginning our webinar today. Denis is going to help us all understand a little bit more about viruses and vaccine. Thank you all to our participants and our panelists for joining us today.
Now that I'm unmuted, thank you, Charlotte, for the introduction. So I am a technical service veterinarian for poultry for Canada with Merck Animal Health. Vaccines are a very important tool in poultry production. They are designed in general to stimulate the body's immune response so that it is primed and that it responds faster and more efficiently when the host encounters the infectious agents in the field. Okay. So we are not just designing or picking a vaccine randomly. There's a lot of planning and thinking that goes into the development of a successful vaccination program. First, we need to know what's going on either on our farm or in our province or in our region. And farmers generally have some ongoing health and performance monitoring program. They do diagnostic, and that really helps them identify the risks, and hopefully they will have measures in place before a devastating disease outbreak occurs. All vaccines are not interchangeable, so it's important to understand the characteristics of the vaccine we choose and the characteristics of the vaccine we need in our organization. And different vaccine will have different level of protection, different level of reactions, different return on investments. Some require different level of labor. So we need to take all of that in consideration. Once we know against what disease we need protection and what vaccine we want to use, we need to give it at the right time. And sometimes it can be tricky, but in general, we try to always administer the vaccine enough before the expected risk period for the particular agent of interest. And then one of the area where I think as an industry we can do so much better is correct administration. Despite all the best planning and selection and so on, if we don't conserve the vaccine correctly, like if it can make it inactive, if administration is not at the proper site, the full dose, we will not have the expected results. So it is very, very important to administer the vaccine correctly to achieve the level of protection that the vaccine is capable of giving. And remember, no vaccine is 100% all the time. Sometimes, we believe that, okay, I'm vaccinated, I'm proof, but every vaccine has its own limitation. So we see a lot of farm application errors that raise questions sometimes, in terms of vaccine efficacy or level of vaccine safety. So all manufacturers are able to help producers address those particular issues. One of the comments I would make though is like the more vaccine can be delivered using automation, in a way, like for example in the hatchery, those methods most of the time and all the time they are validated on a regular basis. Method is standardized, so that's really one of our better chance to put the right vaccine at the right dose at the right location in a bird. So it's really something to keep in mind. Saves labor on the farm too. Now, in general, how are vaccines designed? For those that are interested, the World Health Organization just published a list of the 168 vaccines against coronavirus, against COVID-19. And the same method used to produce poultry vaccines are used. Some of the platforms are exactly the same as the platforms that we'll be talking about here that we are using for poultry vaccine. Of course, there are other platforms as well. So that's why I put that little thing on the top right here in the context of a pandemic. So first type of vaccine are the modified live vaccines. So in a modified live vaccine, we simply attenuate the infectious agent of interest, whether it's a virus or a bacteria, and we attenuate it so that it's not as virulent or as pathogenic to the host as the field virus. And really, this type of vaccine, it really mimics a natural infection. If you miss some birds, it's possible that with certain modified live product, there will be some lateral transmission or horizontal transmission, and that the rest of the flock will end up being vaccinated. Of course, one of the risks of that is that if you have flocks of different ages on the same farm and that you use a modified live virus in some older bird, it's possible it gets transmitted to another barn and can cause some issues. So there is some planning that needs to be done there. So there's a lot of choice, but the modified live is the closest to a natural infection and really induce a rather complete immunity most of the time. And there are many ways in which those vaccines can be used. We can either spray them on the birds, on the hatchery, and really then the main route of intake is through the eye, through the nostril, through the mouth. We can administer it on the farm in the drinking water. So those two types of application are mass application that are used in all type of birds. In the case of long-lived birds, there's some vaccine that may be eye drop, so just simply putting a drop into the eye. And then other vaccines are administered individually, like in long-lived birds via the wing web, punctured through the wing web, and that's how they get vaccinated. Second type of platform used to immunize birds is we actually take the whole organism, the whole virus or the whole bacteria, and we inactivate it or we kill it in a gentle way so that it conserves its epitope, the key antigens of interest. And we give the whole organism to the birds. So this type of vaccine in poultry is only in Canada, is only used in long-lived birds, and typically it's used to try to induce high level of antibodies into the birds so that it will protect production, or it will keep high antibody levels during the whole production in layers, and also in breeders, and as an attempt to try to transfer some maternal antibodies to the progeny through the egg. Typically, those type of inactivated vaccine also contain an adjuvant, and an adjuvant is something that is added to the vaccine to enhance the immune response. The last type of vaccine that we have in poultry, the last type of platform, are recombinants. And in the case of poultry, the recombinant vaccine we have are replicating virulence. So what we do for recombinant, for example, we use Marek vaccine, the virus of the Marek vaccine, and we insert gene from other agents into the genome of the Marek vaccine, so that when the Marek vaccine replicates into the bird, it protects not only against Marek disease, but against one or two other additional disease. And it's a very safe way to do it. So one example of recombinant vaccine include like Marek in combination with infectious laryngotracheitis, for example. That's a good way to vaccinate flocks against infectious laryngotracheitis without introducing the live virus into the flock. So how do vaccines benefit in poultry? This slide includes 13 chicken disease against which there is a commercial vaccine available in Canada. For example, like without protection against Marek disease, a lot of people have said that there would not be a sustainable commercial poultry industry around the world. For example, it's a disease that is everywhere, every bird will get it, and they may get symptom out of it. And so since we're vaccinating we have the impression that that disease has disappeared, but it's really because we vaccinated that we have that. Now, and also, how do vaccines benefit poultry? With the current emphasis of the chicken farmers of Ontario and of Canada on antibiotic use reduction, vaccine in most cases are a great investment with positive return on investment. And in some other case, I have to admit that we use them more as an insurance policy because we don't, although the disease might not be around currently, but there's too much risk if we stop vaccinating. So just add a level of protection. And I also want to remind people that a vaccine alone is not enough to control all disease outbreaks. It's very important to always practice the proper biosecurity, to have like the cleaning, disinfection, sanitation protocols, downtime, all have a huge impact on the prevention of these important poultry diseases. So, and how do vaccines benefit poultry? For breeders and commercial layers, really, we are protecting the bird's health, its production, health quality, and more, we are talking about food safety. So these are the kind of tangible benefit that we have in that type of long-lived birds. In breeders, in birds that produce our eggs for our broilers, in addition to protecting the bird, we design program that will protect the progeny. So there is some disease that are vertically transmitted, such as reovirus, chicken anemia virus, avian encephalomyelitis. These diseases, like we don't want them in our broiler, and they can be prevented if we vaccinate the progeny correctly. We also try to induce high level of maternal antibody against bronchitis, Gumboro disease, reovirus in some cases, so that the broiler under a normal challenge won't need to be vaccinated on the farm. So it might be protected long enough. And also we are talking about food safety, trying to reduce the transmission of pathogens such as salmonella down the chain. And then the least, and in broilers, we're really looking at protecting their health, their viability, their production, and reduce contamination. So these are all the benefits that we really are receiving from vaccines. And in closing, what were the impact of COVID-19 on our operations at Merck Animal Health? And on my day-to-day life in particular? I have to admit that several of the projects that I was working on have been delayed and are just about to restart, except that there's going to be very limited travel involved from my part. All customer contact were maintained, just that it was no longer face-to-face. So far, we did not have any cases in any of our manufacturing sites. So the supply has not been affected by COVID so far. That doesn't mean that there's been no supply issues. Every company always have these little issues once in a while. And one of the big things that I've seen for our customer is that there's been a labor challenge, both in the hatcheries and with some of the vaccination crews on the farm. So they had difficulties sometimes like sticking to the schedule they had put together. And so the additional physical distancing measure really impacted a lot of that. And in some hatcheries, I would say that they had issues having the staff needed to maintain regular operations. And with this, I want to reiterate that it's a whole package. There's a lot of vaccines available. Not all vaccines are used in every flocks. They are used against the most common and the most economically important bacterial and viral disease in poultry. And if they are used correctly, they provide a real good return on investment. Thank you. Can I
Well,
go to mute now? Okay, thank you.
well, thank you, Denis, for joining us and for sharing that. It is amazing to consider all of the research and time that go into creating these vaccines, but also the benefits that our flocks have, you know, not just from the vaccine from the bird that receives it, but even their prodigy for if it's a breeder stock we're talking about. So it's a huge amount of research and there's so much to be gained from it. I think I now understand why when people discuss the second wave, they're now just hoping for a vaccine that can be highly efficient. So now that we've kind of had some idea about why that phrase of vaccines comes in so frequently in COVID conversations, we didn't want to miss out on using it as well. It is now time to talk chicken. So as I break into my chicken wings, I welcome you to all join in this discussion and conversation. To start it off with, though, we're going to open up with Becky, and she's going to start our discussion because I think it seems logical. What goes in, just like my lunch, must come out. So let's start by talking about feed. Why don't you let us know, did Alltech have to start from scratch, I mean, reacting to a pandemic, or had past disruptions like weather events and market fluctuations encouraged them to mitigate measures that were already in place? If so, what kind?
Thank you, Charlotte, and thank you to all the attendees that are on here for our lunch. Hope they're enjoying chicken like you are. Um, Actually, we created what we call our ROC team, which is our crisis and risk management team, about 14 years ago. So we have a small team of senior managers that are on it. And when COVID first started in January, before we called it COVID, in China, our China team was already on the ground working on it because we do have manufacturing, laboratories, and sales there. And so our ROC team got involved very early on in January, started putting together procedures, working on work from home procedures, as well as how would we handle it in our facilities and labs. Then as it moved into Europe, we obviously stepped this up and continued. So we have calls every single morning with our team, and also with Dr. Mark Lyons, our CEO, is on it every morning. So again, it's led from the top. But we were able to get ahead of it just because we had some experience from China, but also because we have a team that has been trained on both the risk side, the crisis management side, for 14 years. so we were lucky in getting very ahead of it. We also, since we did get a head start, we wanted to make what we had available to our customers and colleagues and friends. So we actually have a COVID site on the Alltech website. So it's publicly available. That would have some of the webinars we've done, some of the procedures, infographics. We're always kind of updating it, work from home information. So we are maintaining, we're very active in this space. So.
I think it's amazing to consider because of a national company, you've had so many opportunities to learn. And I love that you're so transparent, that the material is there on the website. If anyone hasn't checked out those webinars yet, do it. You won't regret it. And having those processes available, it's fantastic.
Well, and it's amazing because since we are international, it's been kind of a rolling issue. As one place we're starting to work on return to work policies, another one's going off. So it's been a rolling thing, which has been very interesting.
Absolutely. You've had the chance to, see that roll out and then make changes and modifications, but stay on top of all of the deal. It's great. That's a wonderful resource for us. Thank you very much, Becky. Now, once those birds have reached the end of their stay in the barn, it's time for transportation, which means we're going to turn over to Sarah from Moonfleet. I'm sure you've had some ups and downs between the beginning of the pandemic and then the lockdown, being essential service and keeping that working. Let's hone in on what was the biggest challenge for you.
Yeah, so the biggest challenge for us, Moonfleet is a large catching company. We work for the likes of Maple Leaf, Cargill, Pinty's, and some provincial processors. And the biggest challenge for us was looking at our operations and figuring out how we were going to keep our employees safe, and then how we were going to keep everything going. Because the fact of the matter is, you really can't work from home when you catch chickens. You have to be going out onto farms every single night. So kind of the first thing that we ran into was just making sure that all of our guys understood that we were essential services, that there were birds in the barns, that they needed to get out, so we needed to keep going. A large number of our employees are temporary foreign workers, so I mean, fortunately, we're operational year-round, so we already had all the employees we needed here, so we didn't run into problems with getting them into the country. But all of our employees started saying, "Hang on, we've got vacations booked. Like, can we cancel our vacations? Can we reschedule them? We were planning on going home for a year and coming back. We think we're going to stay now." And that's something that's been really challenging, because I know a lot of our guys are really struggling with a lot of homesickness and not knowing when they're going to be able to travel home and seeing their families. So that was kind of the first challenge, but we do have enough staff that we did bring in a couple guys from Jamaica recently, but we haven't had to really deal with that the way the fruit and vegetable growers have had to deal with that. And then kind of the next big thing was, you can't really physically distance when you're loading chickens as well. So, and part of it with the temporary farm workers is we're required to supply them housing. So because we own the houses that the majority of our employees live in, then we were sourcing disinfectants, reminding them that they need to be cleaning the houses regularly, discouraging them from leaving the house too much on weekends when they're outside of work, telling farmers that we really, really wanted them to have some sort of hand washing facilities available to them, because it drives me nuts. Lots of farms don't have sinks and bathrooms available. So we told all of our processors were really great, and asked us what we wanted to keep our operations running. And we said, we really want every farm to have some sort of hand washing facility, even if it's a garden hose somewhere or a bucket somewhere. We need some sort of means of being able to wash our hands at the end of a load. And all of our processors were very good at communicating that to their farmers, reminding them that we still need it today, and that we want that available to us. The other thing is that our guys all wear N95 masks when they're in the barn, and those were in short supply really, really quick. So we had a pretty good supply built up, but when you've got 200 catchers out every night wearing a couple masks over the course of their load, you go through a lot of masks really, really quickly. So we started trying to source other masks. We have a selection of KN95s. We got a bunch of 3M half-face P100 particle respirators for our guys, which worked really well until it got hot, and then they didn't want a rubber face mask on their face. We were, telling farmers we wanted to try to have as much physical distancing between them and our crews. We didn't want them picking up anything from our guys, and we really didn't want our guys picking anything up from them. We had lots of open communication with our processors, going back and forth with where we were at, seeing if we could work together as a group. Riverdale does the transport for Maple Leaf and Cargill, so we work really closely with them. So we were very upfront and open with them with what was going on with our employees, and they were very upfront with what was going on with theirs, because when we're loading crates, for instance, my catchers are quite literally passing off handfuls of birds to their drivers, so you can't stay 6 feet away from them at that time. So yeah, it was just kind of the logistics of all of that, and then trying to keep everybody's morale up and keeping everybody in good spirits. With my job, I'm normally out on the road with the crews all the time, seeing multiple crews every night, and as many as 8 or 9 crews in a given week. And we kind of talked to our processors and said, how do we feel about me being out on the road? And they kind of said, like, make your own choices, but we'd really prefer if you didn't. So we pulled me off the road for about 10 weeks, which really sucked. And I didn't even think about this at the start, but the guys said they felt a bit abandoned because we didn't really know what to tell them. So
sorry, as sometimes happens, one further technical difficulty. Depending on your bandwidth and your broadcasting, sometimes we freeze, and when that happens, we just roll with it. I think Sarah has brought a lot of really important.
Oh no, did my internet go? Oh, I knew it was coming. Oh no, am I back?
You're back.
Oh, good. Where did it cut me off?
from the guys kind of feeling abandoned.
Oh yeah, I felt really bad that we decided to pull me off. They've all been really happy to see me back out on the farm. I didn't know they liked me that much, so that's been really good. So yeah, but it's kind of, we've just settled into a gentle hum of a routine now. We've got a pretty small office, so we have to keep our dispatch people in the office so that they can have everything organized to have our people on the road. But the woman who does our scheduling, she's able to do that from home. But yeah, just kind of keeping everyone chugging along has been kind of the biggest challenge for us. We haven't had any positives, which was good. But we did have one scare where we thought that we might have a guy who was COVID positive, but the cough you get if you have COVID sounds similar to the cough you get if you're a heavy smoker who works in a chicken barn every night. And then when we were talking to him about it, he mentioned that he was feeling chest tightness, which could be a COVID symptom or could also be a symptom of anxiety for thinking you have a major infectious disease. So we were able to get him in to get tested, but it was kind of decided that since this guy doesn't drive, someone had to take him. So as the young, healthy person who lives alone, I drew the short straw and got to take him down, which was fine, except it took 6 days to get his results, and I was running out of groceries pretty quickly, so I had to get a little creative. But he came back negative, and everything's been fine. And you know, part of the thing that's really worked in our favor is that the small towns we keep our crews have had very low instances of cases, and they've been predominantly in seniors' homes, which our guys don't interact with. So we haven't had it too bad, and we certainly know that if there is a second wave coming, there's things we can do to step up and do more and protect our guys further. But yeah, it was a lot of logistics and realizing that there was a lot of stuff that we didn't know because none of us at Moonfleet are doctors or epidemiologists, and with a lot of employees, there's a lot of rumors running around about what everyone thought was right and what everyone thought was not right.
I think between the abandonment they were feeling in the workplace was really just that little amplification of feeling that their family was home somewhere else too. So it really is like you become family when you work that closely and live together like that, and to all of a sudden have someone missing or
Yeah.
potential positive. It's terrifying.
Yeah. Well, and with all of our guys living together and working on the same crews, they do end up becoming really close. And a lot of guys do have their cousins or brothers or nephews who come over and join them here. So they do have some family here. But I mean, for me, I can drive to my mom's house and stand on her lawn and wave at her if I need to. Those guys can't.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. The first few days being able to drive through and have driveway visits with my parents was crucial for my mental health. But it's a whole different ballgame when you're dealing with like delivery on such a mass scale too. I'm glad to hear everything worked out and that you guys have sort of, you know, done the learning curve and the test run through the first round. I think now that we've heard how that food made it from, you know, the hitch, the chick, the feed, and then into the transport, it's time to talk about this delicious food on my plate. And we're going to move over to processing because I love chicken and delicious wings. And although my food is sitting here politely waiting for me to be able to indulge in it all, it's time to hear from Chantal LeBlanc. And she's going to share with us. My question to you is pretty simple. Has COVID-19 changed the way that you operate at Maple Leaf? And if so, how?
Yeah, so I think the obvious answer is yes. Definitely has changed the way our plants and corporate offices operate. You know, back in March, we quickly implemented the work from home policy and no visitors policy, and as well as travel. So we were pretty quick to stop that. But of course, our plants and hatcheries were essential, so they remained open, and the workers were still expected to go and do their daily jobs. So yeah, so we developed a pandemic plan, which is still continuously being updated as we learn new information. But probably the biggest thing that we did at the start was developed risk assessments. So when we did get positive cases, what are the steps involved and how do we handle those situations? So that would involve, you know, where the positive was, of course, how many people are in that work area, and sort of the trace back in work history, and go from there. And then, of course, you know, we had our policies around 14 days at the start, before you could even be considered for the return to work policy. So there was a lot involved from the start, and then every area of the business developed thorough contingency plans, because, you know, it was sort of the unknown at first, like, is this plant going to shut down? Is this plant going to, you know, there were so many unknowns. So making sure we had all those contingency plans, which have been reviewed, they're constantly monitored, for effectiveness. We also implemented daily senior leadership calls, so similar to what Becky was saying. So they were called COVID-19 touch point calls for all the operations. And then, you know, very quickly tried to develop education materials, as we were learning more information about social distancing and about face coverings and masks, trying to put posters all over about the importance of hand washing, because similar to Sarah, when you're in a plant, social distancing becomes quite impossible depending on where you are. So the face masks were very important and mandatory. And then, of course, looking at break times. And so they looked at scheduling break times, to minimize the number of people on break at the same time and in the lunchroom, and actually putting up physical barriers in the lunchroom, and putting X's on chairs to make sure that people were social distance as much as they could on their breaks. One other interesting thing that we did was, we called it video monitoring or auditing. So we implemented this a little shortly after, I'm not sure what month, maybe February or March, but basically we put body cams on employees to identify pinch points in the facilities. So the start of a shift, when a bunch of employees are coming in, you know, identifying those critical points where we need to have more control over. And I should have mentioned this before, we also implemented screening at the plant level. So before every shift, every employee, there's a trailer on site, and you have to go in the trailer, and they do forehead temperature. So they take their temperature before every shift and ask about symptoms, and if you're on any medications for a headache, or very in-depth questions before every shift, to fully understand. One thing I also really liked was they put hooks on doors, so you don't have to touch any door. You can just put your arm through to open it. So little things like that could go a long way to prevent touching several surfaces, right? So yeah, and we've also, of course, PPE is not new to plants and hatcheries, which was nice from our side of the business. But vamping those up and ensuring that we have the right PPE in the right areas, or shields as well if a face mask isn't ideal for a certain area of the plant. Each site has weekly audits. So this is through our Emergency Management Council. They also did mock tabletop exercises with each facility. So a mock tabletop for if they get a positive case, and what the process is that they go through. So making sure that all facilities were aligned on the process involved. And one thing that we're actually piloting right now, which is kind of cool from a technology standpoint, we're just piloting it right now, but looking at a technology that you put in, you can put it in any room or space, and it has an indicator, so a green or red indicator to identify if there's too many people in one space. So that's something we're currently looking at. And I know Becky mentioned this too, but so now we're at a point of looking at the return to work policy, and sort of when is our corporate offices going to open, and then talking about the options for face coverings in those offices as well, and sort of what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. So that's sort of where we're at in terms of the corporate offices. Um, I think I've pretty much covered it. We're trying to remain. Our CEO always says his hair is on fire, so trying not to become complacent. So, as time goes on, you can get more lazy with these things, or maybe not do them as well as you should be. So that's why we have the audits and the video GoPro auditing program, and just constant reminders of the importance of it, for our facilities and our people, with our people as the primary focus. When this all started in March, a lot of our internal projects got put on hold, for good reason, because the facilities needed to focus on the safety of their people and remaining open. So now we're starting to look and revamp some of those projects, which is kind of nice. And then, yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. I mean, I'm totally willing to answer any questions anyone has. Just a little background on me. I've only been at Maple Leaf for about 2.5 years. I started in this role June of last year, so I was only in that role for 9 months until we hit a pandemic. So it's put an interesting spin on my new position at Maple Leaf, but it's been really great, and I think we put ourselves in a really good position from the start, in terms of our risk assessments and totally working from home mandatory right away, but there's still continuously things to learn as new information becomes available.
It's funny because Sarah talked about kind of keeping people in a bubble or keeping people safe, but it's a full different story when you're working on lines and then you're working multiple shifts and segregating. I think just the X's on the chair is amazing. That's the first time I've heard anyone talk about using body cams for pinch points. That's genius, because then you really do see where it's not just difficult to physically distance, it may be impossible. Some hallways, some places that you just might have overlooked. Was that data, did that data come back with a lot of helpful things? Was it?
Oh, for sure. Oh yeah. And PPE as well. So, it's tough as an employee. Like, I know just wearing a mask when I'm out at the grocery store, you might not do proper mask protocol, and you're like, oh shoot, like I didn't mean to do that. And doing that in a plant has a lot, bigger implications. So identifying gaps there. But yeah, the pinch points was huge, and huge props to our IS team. And we're still learning new technologies that we can hopefully utilize. So that'll be ongoing for a while, probably. So
it's so funny because when we think about all of these different protocols, I think that transparency in communicating with staff, how it's being there to help them, is one of those barriers that people took on and just leapt over. And so much of the staff sat back and thought, you know what? This is important, and my employer takes me seriously. I'm a valuable tool. Although, like you said, no one wants to wear a mask all day or have to sit at great distance from a colleague in a lunchroom.
yeah.
But
And sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add, to Sarah's point, about on farm. So we have our own farms and contract farms. So when it first started, we canceled on farm visits to only essential reasons. So if there was a health concern with flocks or whatever, obviously we would still have that communication, but just trying to reduce as much physical interactions with people, right? So yeah, and we're starting to look at revamping that now. So it's kind of nice to sort of see this sort of starting to come back to what may be normal, but with still some differences, right?
Well, and that's why we're trying to capture this. Thank you, Chantal, again for sharing, and everybody so far, because we're trying to capture this at a moment where we've had enough experience to kind of play out what worked, what we were happy with, what we didn't like, and yet no one's still caught in that panic of daily shift and having to manage a million things all at one time. So we hope this is one of the more beneficial times to share that information and get those best practices out there. So hopefully everyone watching was taking notes, because so far we've had a lot of great points. Before we get too far into how wonderful we've all been doing, I'm going to bring it full circle. So Denis, thank you again for your presentation, because that kind of expertise and knowledge is not something that I could have shared with our audience. I do understand it's definitely not business as normal for you at Merck either. But maybe you can tell us a little bit about if this pandemic kind of enabled you to do like a deep rethink of how you're delivering to your customers or the delivery methods.
So early in the confinement, we received a survey from our, leadership team, and really to that point, what is it going to look like after, and what are we going to do different? And really, what some of the things we realize is that we are redefining what is essential travel. Like we're really thinking about what's the future of traditional trade shows and conference, because what we found is we got used to, like, we're missing some of the old way, but there's some good thing in the way we've been doing things with the use of video conference and shorter meeting. Of course, we've learned to use the digital tools that were available to us, but we were not using them because the old way worked well. So we've learned to leverage the technology that was already available to us, and we're thankful that that technology was available. I forget to mention that in the panel, but to have frequent touch point is important, so that we don't work each in our silos. A lot of people won't return to the office. They prefer to work from home, but a lot of people really miss the office. So it's all dependent on personalities. And what the company has implemented right now is that if you want to go work in the office, you have to book your working space, and then there's I think it's 20% capacity that they are allowing, and then that you can have. So there's been doing things like that. As far as biosecurity in our production facility, I think it was all reviewed, but we've been very fortunate not to have cases and to maintain that. So this is, I think, as far as a rethink, I think those procedures were reviewed, but I think it held well. One thing that was really nice for the confinement is, periodically, maybe once a month, we receive some comfort packs, like from the head office, a bunch of snacks and little card deck, along with some PPE and some gel, which I thought was fun and always made everybody happy, and a lot of comments. So keep those little comfort packs coming. That's it.
I like that very much. I must admit that when you say, some people, I'll say I totally agree with you. There is no way until we have a successful vaccine or herd immunity, one way or the other, not everyone will return to the office for many reasons, which are deeply private. But personally, I can't wait to get back to my real desk and stop working at my dining room desk. Not just because the children are a huge distraction, but I miss talking to my colleagues about the business we do as the thought occurs to me. We too are leveraging different technologies, which I think, in customer service, like you said, we used to love our gatherings, our get-togethers, our social opportunities, but now that's all gone by the wayside. So instead, we're doing what we can through Zoom. So
I will say, like, in terms of social activities, I'll just add, like, a lot of our groups have done like virtual like trivia nights with like your teams and stuff, just to stay connected with your employees and your coworkers, right? And because it becomes hard when you're not seeing them in the office every day or whatever, right? So yeah,
even just that creative ongoing assessment of what you already knew and knowledge building, it's so much harder when you're, you can suffer webinar fatigue. I'm not gonna fib. I've been enjoying the Poultry Science Association virtual AGM this week, but 2 days of 8 to 10 hours of webinars and posters and lectures, it's very interesting, but it's exhausting, and I can't see that continuing the rest of my life, although I do see that continuing for quite a while. I think one of the biggest takeaways that I sort of hear over and over in these sessions, it's not about being a just-in-time production. It's about being a just-in-case production. So having those processes, although for some organizations this was a very first of, having not that international scope where you may have had major disruptions before, or even just such a change in process, like having to put up plexiglass in between people and X off the chairs and have half the capacity. We're definitely all learning, and we're trying different things, which is part of what brings us all here today. Just sort of to wrap it up, I'm going to do a quick roundtable with everyone of my panelists, and I'm just going to add, I will mention too, Q&As have been going in the box. Our panelists are answering your questions, so please don't hesitate. Throw them in there. If you haven't thrown one in, but you're curious what might have already been asked and answered, you're welcome to have it scroll through there too. For our roundtable, we're just going to kind of reflect on what's happened and look forward into the future. So I don't have a crystal ball with me today, but if there was a second wave and we had to consider what we did the first time, and in Poultry Industry Council, I'm going to consider it a pretty good success. We pivoted quickly and we did what we needed to do. And we all stayed healthy, which was the bottom line. So I think what we did, we would just continue doing if the second wave were to crash on us tomorrow. But for each of you, do you feel like your business has done what they needed to do and they'll just stay status quo? Maybe you would modify certain things, or maybe you would do a total revamp and start from scratch all over again. So to get us started off, we're going to start with Becky, just because Alltech, that international experience. Go ahead and tell us, do you think you'd ramp up, mitigate, or hold tight?
Well, I think we've been modifying as we go anyway. It seems like things are constantly changing. The guidance we've been given, technology's coming along. We're getting ready to start using actually a bot that will check in with every one of our employees every day to ask health questions and different things that can be logged. So we're always, I think, evolving and improving. So I mean, I think we're happy with what we've done, and we've learned, as everyone has as we've gone. Things like, the PPE, the masks being short in the beginning. I don't think we'll let that happen again. We've now ordered face coverings, like just branded ones for all of our employees that don't need the actual, N95s, so that we'll have those in place. And that was after a lot of screening of different masks, because there's a lot out there and a lot of them aren't good. So I do think that we're happy where we are, but it's always going to be, changing as things progress.
Absolutely. So continuing that evolution. And again, if you haven't checked out Alltech's website, their information is transparent. It's out there so everyone can learn and grow together. Don't hesitate to check it out. Next, we're going to go on to Sarah. Do you think ramp up, modify, hold tight, and keep doing what you're doing? Where'd you go?
I think if a second wave came through, and I think if it was worse, I think we could and would ramp up a lot more. We do, as our houses stand right now, we do have guys from multiple crews in each house. We thought about moving all of our guys around, but we thought that would be pretty upsetting to them. So we thought we would leave them where they were. If we needed to isolate crews so that they all lived in one house, we would do that. We also considered about dedicating crews to certain processors. So having 2 crews do all of Maple Leafs Toronto stuff, 2 crews doing all of Maple Leafs St. Mary's stuff, 2 crews doing Pinty stuff. Our Cargill crews are kind of isolated to Cargill just because they're mod crews as it is. But that's certainly something that we considered. We didn't decide to do that because it would have made scheduling a bit of a nightmare. And also it would have kind of resulted in unequal workloads for all the crews, and they do like it when they all get roughly the same amount of work. That said, if push came to shove, if we really needed to protect them a lot more, I think there are things that we would be able to do, but we just felt that the trade-off wasn't quite worth it for how bad things were. But yeah, certainly if a second wave comes through, there's ways we could do a lot more and protect our guys a lot more. And certainly to Becky's point, we've learned a hard lesson about having masks. As much as it sucks having a mountain of boxes in storage in our office, I think that's probably the way we're going to need to do it moving forward.
Yeah, right. From that just in time to just enough production, it's a tricky balance. But I love the idea of rejigging the housing. I think if I had known how quickly we would go from children just being sent home for March break plus a little to all of a sudden my immediate family inside this house are the only people I get to interact with, I maybe would have opted to move myself to my parents' house. I mean,
Well,
they can stay here.
yeah, exactly. Well, and for us, like the guys in our houses, like, you know, it's kind of like the roommates that you have, and you kind of get used to tolerating them certain ways. And we've got one house of guys where a bunch of them had previously worked in fruit and vegetable stuff, so they have incredible vegetable gardens. And then we've got, you know, one house where guys like to have a lot of fun in their spare time, so those guys like being together. So mixing them up like that and just never being able to get away from the people you work with, like, you know, I think that is extra hard where if the people you work with are also the people you live with. I think that would be a lot of extra stress. So breaking them up as we had them was probably the right call for now, but certainly if we needed to shift them around, but we thought it would be too upsetting to them to move them around for now.
Yeah, I feel like this crisis came on so quick that we all just started acting before we really had time to look through and forethought. That's why this little pause and reflect moment hopefully gives us that insight into like, oh yeah, maybe housing structure and discussing it with staff in advance so that they understand, and balancing workflows. It would all be sort of progressive. All right, Chantal, we're going to go on over to you guys. Is there anything you'd like to add, share, or comments on this about like ramp it up or staying the same?
Yeah, I think we put ourselves in a good place for a second wave, just because we've had such good success at our facilities with everything that we put in place. But the key is to continue to fight the complacency. That's pretty huge. And then of course, like was mentioned about learning all new science and technologies and new recommendations that come out. But also, you know, looking at different things that we didn't consider right away, like ventilation in our plants. Is there something we should be doing to improve the ventilation? And then of course sanitation, but that's something that we're not, you know, we've already have a pretty intense sanitation program, obviously, but looking at different ways of auditing that, but also testing employees potentially. So we don't test our like COVID test our employees, but potentially doing that in the future is something we've considered. And then of course, preparing PPE wise, of course. And yeah, newly advancing technology. So really making sure that we're trying as best as we can to protect our people, and they're the people that are putting food on our plates. So super grateful.
They put food on my plate today and it's delicious. All right, Denis, we're going to wrap it up with you. Do you think you would have to change, stay the same, maybe get twice as many care packages, which hint, hint, I think my company should send more?
I think key thing has been said, like Rebecca mentioned about continually updating procedure based on evolving knowledge. I think we would continue to do that. And also, as Chantal mentioned, I think fighting complacency. Like it's really hard. Like we've had to like interact, you know, with some colleague for a specific situation, and it's not ingrained in our behavior yet to really truly physically distancing. Like it's so hard, and we need to fight that hard. So everything's been said.
Excellent. I love that. And I'm not going to deny it at all. As things change, it is hard not to be complacent and not to just allow people to do what they're doing. And instead of offending them, maybe speak up and say, you know, 2 meters is 2 meters. If you don't need an N95 mask, you still need some mask, because when it's difficult, I want you masked. So just in wrap up, I am going to thank everyone who joined us today. Panelists, for all of your contributions in preparation and practice. It does not go without a little of all. So I do appreciate everything you've done for us. And not only for us, but to keep our food and our houses and our flocks safe. This has been amazing. In an interview lately, Jacqueline Peters, the lead finance and investments from World Business Council of Sustainable Development at Robobank, said that while many companies are just trying to survive in the short term right now, they must not lose sight that there is long-term sustainability goals, because planning for the future is still very important. And that being said, we want to bring our attention to not only the long-term future of a second wave, but also next week, where we're going to talk and focus a little more on resilience, sustainability, and goal setting amid this pandemic and during a potential second wave. We do hope to see you all sign back on again next week, July 28th, one last time at noon, where we wrap up our COVID conversations with our Turkey Tuesday. Until then, let's really listen to this message and not get complacent. Masks, hand washing, physical distancing. Keep on doing the good work we've been doing, and stay safe and stay healthy.